You happy with what it says? It worked out for what you want to do in regards to the reserves competition?
Yeah, it's a great outcome really for us. It's taken a lot of work to get to this phase where we're going to have our own team in the competition, but I think it's going to be great for the competition. The comp always needs to be looked at to revitalise, and I think this is a good opportunity. I think it'll be good for the WAFL, but I also think it'll be good for our young players to play in their own team as well and play together. I don't think for them it will change too much from what they experienced at East Perth, other than they'll be playing for the West Coast Eagles rather than the East Perth Football Club, where I think the players learnt a lot about our system before they played, and that's obviously the idea of having your own team, is so that they know the systems, they know the game plan and strategies and so forth, and when they come into the team they can adapt really quickly.
Coach?
The coach? Oh, we don't know yet. Obviously we only got the licence last night, so we'll start to look through that now.
How far down the track are you in terms of player rules for top-ups and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that'll take about 3 weeks, Mark. I think it'll be maybe 3 weeks we'll have that finalised. There's a lot of work to do on that because there's probably 9 or 10 different scenarios of where we'll get our players from, and it obviously means that we need to be restricted in a lot of areas where we don't impact the current club situations. So we'll have to work through that. But Brady Rawlings and Craig Vozzo and a group from the WAFL and the Football Commission will get together and start to work through that.
Do you have any early thoughts on that as to like some ideas you would have in terms of where you might source them?
We do. We think generally we're going to be looking at players for position rather than just outright talent, because it'll depend on what we've got drafted in and what we've got on our list and who we think's going to play. So we might end up having to draft a centre or find a centre forward or a centre half back or a ruckman or whatever to fit the roles that we need to play in the comp, and that's also challenging, because if you just went after talent, it would be a little easier than looking at all the positional moves that you have to make.
What does the team look like? What name will they play under? What will the jumper look like? And where do they play home games?
Well, all that's to be worked out, but we'll probably play in our alternate strip, or we'll play in our Indigenous Guernsey, which I think would be a great fit for what we're trying to achieve. But again, we'll have to work that out. The games we'll get some home games, but that'll have to be negotiated as well, and there'll be most of our games will be away from home. And remembering, of course, there's only the senior team playing, but hopefully there's a gap to be filled there, maybe with some women's football before our games and things like that. So hopefully there's some opportunities that'll open up.
Will your top-ups train with the club, or will they be separated? So if you go and get, say scenario, you go and get 8 really good reserves players who probably aren't good enough to play WAFL footy but have got some talent, do they train with your Eagles senior squad? Where do they fit in?
I've got no idea, Tim. We really haven't gone through all the scenarios of where they'd train, what times they'd train, and how it's going to fit together. This is the first time, obviously, we've had to do this, so it's going to be a little tricky for our guys to sort through that. But there are models in Melbourne that work really well. I think Geelong's is pretty good. I think Box Hill's obviously pretty good with what Hawthorn have been doing for years. So there's a number of things that we can learn out of those clubs.
Is just saying, if you did get to play home games, would Lathlane be your preference? That's where you want to play those home games?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because we'll have our premises there, we want the players to experience at least playing at home and developing them to make sure that they understand, they're there to be competitive and win. They're not just there to make up numbers. And we've seen with the scenario in South Australia this year, it didn't work very well, where the teams got belted on a regular basis. I mean, that's not good for anyone. We need to maintain the integrity of the WAFL competition, and we want to be competitive every week and win games of footy. Now, that's going to take a lot of doing, because a lot of our players will be very young, but in saying that, they'll be very talented as well.
There is a bit of crossover in some of the guys at East Perth, like McGinnity and Wellingham and those guys. I'm assuming it'd be hands off those guys as far as you guys are concerned for your team, or that hasn't been worked out?
No, it would be hands off those guys, but there might be some players, for example, coming off the list this year, or potentially some players who've played with us in the past that maybe aren't even playing, that we might be able to utilise to make comebacks and come and help our young players. So we're going to work through all those sort of scenarios to find out what we can do.
Would the other clubs encourage you to sort of discover talent, if you like, as well, like people that they haven't come across that aren't on their lists, that you may be able to access and showcase and maybe eventually pass them on to a WAFL club?
I'm sure they'd love to steal them off us if we can find some. You know, that's the idea, I think. I think if we can actually expose some more talent to the competition, that's what we're about. If we can do that, I think it helps everyone. And then if they're from a zone that a WAFL club has, and they can convince the player to keep playing WAFL with them in the future, that's fine with us as well.
You're talking about like a guy like Drew Petrie. Has he said he'd be interested in playing?
I haven't asked him, but I mean, he's the sort of guy where you could talk about and think, well, could Drew help us for 12 months and just fill in from time to time if we're short on a tall? And I think Brady Rawlings might have to sort through that sort of list management to find out who we've got available and how we can get them to play.
What's the size of your top-up squad?
It's probably going to be up to about 15. We will have a squad this year of 47, which includes 2 Cat B players, which includes 2 basketball guys that we've got in, and we'll have to train them up. But at least with our situation now, we'll be able to play them, because at East Perth we always had 3 or 4 players playing in the reserves, but now we'll be able to play them in the senior team and give them a run and see very quickly whether they're going to measure up to the standard.
So there won't be a cap on how many guys you can put on the park, like how many AFL listed guys you can put on the park?
No, there won't be. Yeah.
Do you feel like the Eagles brand, or the Eagles playing in a WAFL competition, will draw people through the gates, do you think?
I hope so. I hope it draws a lot of people, and I hope our members get on board and come along to watch us play South Fremantle at Fremantle Oval, and we get a big crowd there, so that, one, they can have a look at some of the aspiring young players to get into our senior team, but they can also look at the standard of the WAFL competition, which I think is extremely strong, and more people getting along to the footy is only going to help, and it helps the commercial side of each of the clubs, but certainly it'll help expose our kids to more and more people watching.
Where do your top-up players go when they're not playing for you? Because obviously what we're seeing with both Peel and East Perth, it gets quite volatile in terms of player availability once the AFL season's up and running.
Well, I assume they'll go back and play, and this is an assumption, I assume they'll go back and play with their original club. And that might even mean if there's a country player in our top-up list, they'd go back and play with their country team. If there's an amateur player, they'd go back and play with their amateur club. The difference, I think, with what I've seen with the amateur football is that the amateur clubs are really used to that sort of system. Guys drop in and out of the thing. Guys go on holidays, mid-season and miss 3 weeks, which drives the coach of the amateur side nuts. But I mean, that's what happens, and they're probably more used to that sort of system. So I guess we'd get away with that, and the players would understand as top-up players that'll happen from time to time.
The other side of this is East Perth. How confident are you that they'll put a competitive team on the deck in 2019?
Well, I assume they started the day they told us they weren't going to be we weren't going to be in the partnership. So I assume they're well down the track to replacing all of their guys. I don't know, because I haven't spoken to Dean about that, but my assumption was that they were well and truly underway trying to get players in, and certainly that's what they should have been doing, and hopefully they'll have a pretty competitive team, because I assume also that the AFL, the WA Footy Commission, are allowing them to go and recruit, and they need to. They need to get some senior players in.